All right, welcome back, Aspire to Lead listeners, and of course, the Teach Better family. Thank you so much for joining us once again this week. And I have a phenomenal leader, educator, author, podcaster. I get along with this man so well because we have so much in common, which means that we just have our hands in so many different projects. So with that, Dr. Matthew Woods, thank you so much for being on Aspire to Lead.
What's going on, brother? Good to be on here.
It's great to have you on the show. I had the pleasure and honor of being on your podcast, and we're going to talk about that later. But for those who haven't checked it out, make sure you do so. I want you to subscribe as soon as you get done listening to this episode, because Dr. Matthew Woods does a phenomenal job, and we're going to talk about a lot of his different projects. But first off, sir, I want to congratulate you on getting a brand new position. I'd love for you to share the wonderful news with my audience.
Thank you, Josh. Josh, please call me Matt. Please call me Matt. We're friends, man. You don't have to be that formal on here. But no, I'm excited to be on here, and thank you for the words of encouragement. I've recently accepted the position of Assistant Superintendent of Student Services for Petersburg, in Petersburg, Virginia. I might throw that out there because I know you're broadcast on a lot of different districts and states all throughout. So here in Virginia, I'm super excited. I'll actually transition into that role June 1st. So it is, a quick turnaround, but I'm excited to get there and connect with the community and get to work. So yeah.
So let's talk about that role, because it's a very fancy title, and I wanted folks to understand kind of maybe the roles and expectations that go with that position, because I've said it before on this podcast. I want folks to understand that there are not three positions, right? It's not just teacher, assistant principal, and principal. Right? There are plenty of different roles and responsibilities in the district. And so if you wouldn't mind sharing kind of, what that role encompasses, I think that would benefit a lot of folks.
Got you. So the easy way for me to say it is any and everything that encompasses services to students. I mean, I'll be honest with you, that's the way to think about it. But it is a
big umbrella.
All joking aside, so it does include everything when we think about security, when we think about transportation, when we talk about nutrition, the technology, when we talk about the infrastructure, so like facilities and so forth. And all of those things, when you stop, they all do intersect when it comes to students and the type of services and how services are being provided. And for me, the way to think about my role, or a role like this for your listeners out there, if you aspire to do something like that, I'm really overseeing and managing, but most importantly, helping people be even more efficient and helping to remove barriers to not impede the work so other folks can be successful. And I've always tried to keep that mentality and that mindset, regardless of what leadership role I've been in. When you are in a leadership role, you're there to serve others, but to make their jobs easier. Like you take on more headaches and responsibility to lessen their load, so they're more productive. And you also, and this is actually something I stole from my mentor, you also try to help people anticipate problems or barriers before they're there, and to kind of clear the path for them. So like, even if they don't see it yet, you want to be able to hear what they're telling you, how they're responding, what they're doing, and really kind of think, or help them think 2 steps ahead. Like, okay, if we're going to consider this, have we also considered this? Or if we haven't considered this yet, and this could be on the horizon, what can I do, or what can we do together to remove those potential barriers to make sure that all students not only are just supported, but are being successful? So that's, I guess, my mentality I've had for all the leadership positions I've had currently. That's going to be the mentality that I go in there into my new position. But the other thing really, Josh, and I'm saying all this before I've actually started, right? It is really just, I'm going to go in there with open eyes and open ears. And I just want to hear from people, see things from their perspective, and really just hear from them what they need from me to help them be successful.
No, I think that I'm so happy that you talked about the transition, because that is a part of moving from one role to another that people don't think about. And you need to have those goals, and you need to be able to, assess what's going on within that position to begin with. And so I love that you're already thinking about that and shared that and communicated that here on this podcast. But Matt, I want you to talk about your leadership journey, because I know you've been in leadership for a while now and have had multiple roles. So if you wouldn't mind sharing kind of where you've been prior to your new position.
Yeah. So leadership roles, and I tell folks a lot, I actually go all the way back to when I was in the classroom, because I think of different leadership roles and responsibilities I took on and didn't really realize how it would not only just impact me, but impact my mindset, impact my leadership style as I've, transitioned to different roles and responsibilities throughout the course of my career. So even when you go, all the way back, I like to say all the way back in time, earlier in my career, when I was in the classroom, being a supervisor like the National Honor Society, supervising the Minority Student Alliance, being a basketball coach, there were different things that I was doing then that I think sometimes when educators think about, oh, well, traditional leadership roles, no, when you're doing something, when you're supervising and managing others, that is leadership, regardless of the capacity, because a lot of those same traits and characteristics you would still apply in some shape or fashion in other roles. From some of those roles, then I transitioned into being a assistant principal at both the middle school and high school level. I've been a middle school principal. I've been a director of student support services, so that's at the central office level. And then obviously as I transitioned into this new role as an assistant superintendent. So those are the different avenues and things when it comes to leadership that, from my experience, that I've been a part of and that I've done in my career or my journey. But it's funny when you ask that question, Josh. I always tell people, I always go back to my time in the classroom, and I think about how those tenets and those responsibilities became more macro over time and just grew, even though maybe my title changed and the level of responsibility, but those components and characteristics of what I did then have still followed me all the way through my career.
Yeah. In fact, I'm thinking about my own journey. If I wasn't a coach, I would have never got tapped on the shoulder to say, hey, you're making an impact beyond the classroom. We think you would be a good administrator. So sometimes inadvertently, when you're taking on more responsibilities, although it's enhancing your leadership journey, it's also potentially giving you an avenue to maybe move in position also.
Mm-hmm.
Did someone tap on your shoulder as far as, hey, Matt, you need to think about this?
Several people did. Several people did. And I tell folks all the time, I had a very roundabout way coming into education because I have a lot of family members who are educators. For example, like my mom, she's a science, a biology teacher, excuse me, and then became a principal. She was like a high school principal. She ran an alternative program. So I tell folks all the time, from the education standpoint, I would always tell folks, I saw the behind the scenes, not just the teacher in front of you or the principal with the radio doing lunch duty and bus duty and all that stuff. But, I saw the late nights doing grading papers. I saw the, hey, honey, we're going to have to do this a little later because I got to call these parents back. I've heard my mom get cussed out on the phone before. Oh, yeah. And I'm like, she didn't even do nothing. She's telling you what your kid did. You're yelling at her, So, I tell people all the time, when folks were nudging me to get into education, or hey, Matt, I think you'd be a great teacher, or hey, Matt, I think you'd be a good leader, I was like, I don't know about this, because I could tell people hi, you can't trick me. I see the backside of this, right? But I say that to say, I'm glad I was exposed to those things, because as people asked me these questions and wanted me to assume some of these roles and responsibilities, especially when it comes to leadership, right? I had a database to pull from. I knew, you didn't have to really coerce me into it. I knew I know what I'm signing up for. Sure. And I knew it going into it. And I think that's very powerful, because when we think about teacher burnout, when a topic that doesn't get addressed a lot, as well as leadership burnout, I think people really don't see the full gambit of what they're getting into. Mm-hmm. And that's what causes the stress, the anxiety, and the issues. So for me, having those experiences. And then when I had people like, shout out Mr. DeWitt House, he was a phenomenal assistant superintendent of instruction back in the day in the district I'm in, or Dr. Cotton, who was the superintendent. Like, I can name so many people who saw things in me and really kind of helped give me the nudge and encourage me. And yeah, pulling it in with those experiences, I just kind of ran with it.
No, I love that you had that behind the scenes prior to, because I think that tapers expectations and surprises, like you said. So I think that gave you a leg up probably than most of us as we're learning what the role is in the midst of it, and probably getting surprised. I know the first time I got cussed out by a parent was definitely a surprise.
Yeah.
So let's talk about compassionate leadership. I know this is a topic that you're, well, talking about passion, right? You're passionate about this too. So compassionate leadership, what does that mean for you within your leadership journey, and why is it such a focus for you within your own leadership position?
Yeah. So when we think about compassionate leadership, a good way to think about it, or I think if you looked up, was it like Webster's dictionary, or, if you try to Google, like, what is a definition of compassionate leadership? It's really talking about how you use your head and your heart to make decisions, and how you do that in a way that influences and inspires others and the work that you're doing. Now, I want to caution people when I say that doesn't mean, oh, I got a gut feeling I should just do this and disregard what the data's saying, or what, like that. That's not compassionate leadership. But what it is asking you to do is, for example, when you're looking at that data and you have to make data-driven decisions, which I'm a firm believer in, you do it in a very authentic and compassionate way. So you look at it and you say, okay, for example, I see that John scores took a large dip this semester. It just doesn't seem like John. John is always rocking it, and I see this. So, we need to probably get in there. Might have the instructional coach talk to him, professional development. But you know what else? John's mom just passed, and we all know the relationship he had with her. And he's telling us he's okay. But you know what? We were already getting the vibe. He just ain't really been himself. He's not, we know he's not smiling as much, but he just seems very reclusive. Like, he just seems not himself. And I've noticed when I've gotten feedback through the walkthroughs, it does look like the quality of instruction has dipped a little bit. That could be playing a part into it. Before I just throw the instructional coach in there, maybe I just need to reach out. Hey, John, you told us a couple months ago you're good. I just want to revisit. Are we good? Is there anything I could do to help? And just to see, because that could be playing a part. And taking those things into account, that's when I talk about compassionate leadership, is really diving in there and really understanding that context of what you're doing and what can you do to meet people halfway. And from there, that's how you go into the work and influencing and inspiring others using that mindset.
No, I love it. I always talk about, when I do PD, as best way to get knowledge to the brain is through the heart. And I think that balance needs to occur, right? It's that yin to the yang of having, like you said, the mind, the data to go with, sometimes the heart and the emotions. That is so vital, especially when you talk about, education and relationships being so important. So, if you're only making decisions on data and information, you probably are going to make some right decisions, but you're probably going to miss that human element that is so necessary in that role.
Yes. And what I try to nudge people along sometime to understand is that data could actually nudge you towards the compassion. Like, the data could show me, you know what? In the example I used a minute ago, John told us he was fine, but it's not like from the side of just as a human being, we're noticing a change in gestures, demeanor, etc. But you know what? Now, professionally, right? Like, work-wise, there's a struggle. So the data is reinforcing what some of us probably already saw, or we're like, oh, I kind of, but he's telling me he's fine. Like it could all get, or it might not be related, but either way, it's giving us more context for the data. But most importantly, it's given us another way or another avenue to engage those conversations. Instead of just saying, hey, your data dropped. I'm gonna send Mr. Stamber in here, to help you with these literacy stuff. It could be another way I start the conversation, right. And let's play, both sides, right? He might say, you know what, thank you, Dr. Woods. Still taking it hard with my mom. I understand. Okay, well, listen, we'll still have Mr. Stamper check in with you and help you. Mm-hmm. If you need to talk, we've got counselors or things we can do. Hey, man, just you don't have to tell everybody your business, but we just want you to know we care about you. Yep. Okay, right? On the flip side, he might say, no, thank you for checking. I'm good. I just look different set of kids this year. I really need to buckle down differentiating. I'm sorry. Okay, cool. We can have Mr. Stamper help you. So either way, we're getting to the proper solution. It's just being compassionate in how we do that, and to show them that, hey, we care about you. You have to perform, but at the same time, we're going to meet you where you're at to get you to where we need you to be.
Right. All right. So, Matt, I want to transition into resources because I know you offer quite a bit. And so we had mentioned earlier about your wonderful podcast. I've got a button here for those who are watching on YouTube. So thank you for that, Matt. Wear it proudly. But yeah, if you wouldn't mind talking about your wonderful podcast, kind of, why you started it. And I know you've been doing it for a little while now, and, how it's supporting educators and leaders all over this country.
Thank you, man. So the podcast is called Leading Out the Woods.
Yep. And
for all the listeners out there, if you're not familiar with it, I know there's a grammar type, but leading out the woods, not leading out of the woods. Because I get folks like, you're supposed to be educating us. But it's a funny backstory behind it. So the short end of it was when I was in graduate school at University of Georgia at the time, I had a buddy of mine. In between classes, we would kind of talk shop, and we would talk about theories and different strategies and things we were doing, blah, blah, blah. And he would always make a little comment, man, Matt, you always got pretty good ideas, and you're so country. And it kind of just stuck. Like, it was like, and other people were like, oh yeah, leading out the woods. So I remember a time before, him and one of my other buddies like, man, it'd be dope if you did a blog. And I said, man, I'm too busy to write a blog. I'm already writing these papers, and I'm doing, I'm evaluating teachers. I ain't got time to write a blog. But the idea just kind of stuck with me. So then we fast forward to 2019. And I think we all know what happened as we creeped into March and April 2019. The pandemic hit. So everything was disjointed. Everybody was pretty much pushed virtual. You didn't know when we were going to be back in person. Yeah, all this crazy stuff. And it got blurred when you think about like responsibilities as it pertained to like a lot of us then kind of became virtual instead of in person. So I know for me, I was working all through the night, and I was like, okay, I need to unplug because now the lines between me turning on and off are just really getting out of hand, right? So I came back to this scrapbook of ideas that I have. I keep this, believe it or not, y'all, I keep this little black book called Ideas, and I just jot crap down in it. And when I flipped it open one night, it was like Leading Out the Woods. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right. That'd be dope. I should do a podcast instead of a blog. Well, how do I do a podcast? Josh, I stayed up one night, man, or one weekend, just watching YouTube clips, y'all, like for dummies, how to start a podcast. And I was like, okay, it says you need some artwork. Okay, I knew someone who does art. I was like, so then it was like, you need a dope intro and outro song. So a former teacher that I work with, who was a musician, I said, hey, would you make me a dope little intro and outro? I mean, like, this is literally how it blew up. And it started with mostly self-reflections. So if you listen to the first maybe 4 or 5 episodes, it's really kind of self-reflections. And what grew out of it, Josh, was people said that I know, they said, well, Matt, you know all these amazing people. Hey, man, it'd be cool if you could bring them on as guests. Okay, yeah, we could try that. Let me reach out to a couple of people. And I was amazed, Josh, at the kind of love and support I got. And blink your eyes, and we're 100+ episodes, and 3 years later, and we've actually now spawned recently into anchor chats, which goes up in between the episodes. But the anchor chats are small 8 to 10 minute self-reflection tips that I do, but it's leading people towards professional development. So I think one of the most recent ones we did was sustaining relationships. And I just talked about a couple experiences I've had and talked about, hey, here are different ways you can nudge yourself towards professional development to not only build relationships, but a lot of times we don't do the work and the support and the training on how we sustain them. Because it's one thing, you know, first day, I'm meeting Josh, meeting Matt, they're in my class, or these are my new colleagues. But then, you know what? Fast forward, now we're in January, and now everybody's tired. How do I keep that same momentum and that same positivity? So that was what like our latest anchor chat talked about. And yeah, man, it's just been a blessing.
Well, that's super powerful. I love the chat that correlates to the podcast. I think that's something that not a lot of folks do. So make sure, for those who are listening, again, subscribe to the podcast, but then also, you know, try to engage in a different way with those chats that Matt offers. So I want to talk about next something that started as flashcards that turned into a book. So Leading Out the Woods, the book, Nurturing School Etiquette for Success. Let's talk about that resource. What is the book about? And how did you transform from such a small piece, which is the flashcards, to a large resource?
Definitely. So I am very much a practitioner. Mm-hmm. And I'm very much about listening to people and hearing like, okay, what is working? What is not working? What would you like? What are you thinking? So one thing that I do that really helps me engage and with my work is different presentations. When I feel that love or that vibe, or people like, hey, I got a lot of questions about this, that's generally, Josh, what leads me into other parts of my work, my research, etc. So one of the things that stemmed out of it was I do a lot when I talk about academic language. And I think for the listeners on there, you're probably very familiar with academic language. But if you're not, the nitty gritty is the words and the comprehension kids need to be successful in school. That's just like a real kind of basic way to think about it. And, you know, we could talk about tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 words. Josh, have me back on. We can go down a whole rabbit hole about that, right? But sticking to the topic right now, though, I use that lens to talk about behavior. Because one of the things that I've noticed in my experiences is that we do a very poor job. And when I say we, I'm just talking about educators. And even as parents, now I'll put myself on the spot as well as parents. We don't really teach kids the words that we're throwing at them when we talk about understanding proper etiquette in a school. Because you have etiquette, which can be anywhere. But then when we talk about school etiquette, it's very different and can be different than some of the households our kids grow up in. So, you know, one of the things that I know, just my own observations, is, you know, kids they're like, stop being defiant, Josh. You're being insubordinate. Don't be insubordinate. And the kids are like, okay. And I just started asking kids, hey, Josh, what does defiant mean? I don't know. What's insubordinate mean? I just can't do it, Dr. Woods. I mean, you know, and I love, especially the younger kids, because they're so gullible, yes. Right? And then I remember, I said, okay. Well, then I started asking educators, hey, you tell me the difference. What is the difference between defiance and insubordination? I had folks who couldn't tell me the difference. So I said, oh, wait a second. We got a code red, sound the alarms. We got a problem. So that became the one of these presentations I did, talking about school etiquette, expectations. So I remember there was a gentleman, shout this guy out if he's listening, whoever you were, I can't remember your name on the top of my head, sir. But between me doing this presentation for like 100+ people, he said, you know, Dr. Woods, it would be real dope if you just, I don't know, man, had flashcards. That's flashcards. And he said, you know, flashcards, these different terms, you're like, you know what defiance means, insubordination, respect, etiquette. Hey, a lot of these are the same words we find in our code of conduct. So started doing research. Not only in the state I'm in, Virginia, I started looking at other states. He goes, you know what? These are the same terms that you see universally in pretty much all code of conduct. So Josh, from there, we came out with the school etiquette expectation flashcards, the 26 terms that kids and parents and educators need to know. So we pushed them out. A lot of love. People loved them. But folks were still like, okay, I get what you're saying, but how exactly do I really use them, Dr. Woods, right? So in between the presentations, I would kind of walk people through how to use them. And they're like, oh, this is so good. So then I had someone, or I say someone, but multiple people said, you know, man, you just really need a book. You just need a book putting together this presentation. So Josh, like you said, that led into Leading Out the Woods, Nurturing School Etiquette for Success. So a very long-winded way of saying those experiences and presentations are all wrapped up in this comprehensive book. It's an easy read, brother. I'll be honest. The first draft was 163 pages, I believe, and people hated it. If we need to edit this part out, we can. People hated it, not because they didn't like the content. Folks were like, Woods, you are a practitioner like us. When do I have time to read 160 plus pages?
Right.
You're right. What would work for you? You know, Matt, if you could squeeze this sucker down to about 100 pages, excuse me. That makes a lot of, sometimes, and I think as educators, we try to outsmart common sense, right? Like, duh, like that would make a lot of sense. 100, like if I could get down. So I remember asking people, well, I've got all these crazy citations. Matt, we know what MTSS is. Right. What educator doesn't know MTSS, right? You don't need to tell me the definition of, like, I don't need all your citations for it. Right. You just need to say how you've taken MTSS and how you're plugging it in with this. So there was a lot of stuff. I like to say I really kind of trimmed some of the fat off of it and got it down to as clear cut as possible. And that, man, that's how we got the book. And the book has been great. It's very rewarding for me to hear people reach out either through, like Twitter, through email, and just say, hey, Matt, this has really kind of caused us to do a huge mindset shift in our schools and our divisions. But most importantly, the data is backing it up. Like, hey, we're really getting intentional when you talk about these etiquette lesson plans. So that's another thing, Josh, I don't think you're not going to talk about. Like, so we recently came out with the etiquette lesson plans, which are a set of behavior expectation plans that can be universally used by any teacher. We also have template lesson plans where then we say, okay, we've kind of walked you through what proper hallway etiquette could look like, what proper classroom and cafeteria etiquette look like, what restroom could look like. Hey, now you have your blank one, so you can kind of mix and match it. And it's been real good because people are using it, and the feedback that I'm getting where they're like, hey, this is very practical, it's making sense, and I'm already seeing how it's being effective.
Man, I love this. So yeah, this is something that is a huge struggle. Every campus I've been on is the universal expectations, but also the universal definitions, because like you said, everyone comes in with different experiences, different makeup in the home, different lessons being taught throughout their life. And one teacher may define it one way, another defines it a different way. One student defines it one way, another student defines it different. So, as a leader, it's so important to make sure that everyone understands what these words are and the definition. So, kudos to you for listening to the need and creating something for folks.
So I will tell you the first 3 chapters, to be transparent with everybody. The first 3 chapters does exactly what you're talking about, Josh. It addresses, hey, that elephant in the room. We say we want all kids to act this way or to know these things coming in, but let's pause. Are we on the right page? Do we have a clear mindset? Because I think a lot of times we say, well, we need the kids to have clear language. Well, no, first, as educators, we need to have clear language. We need to have clear expectations. So the one I'll just throw this nugget out there, Josh, to give people an idea of what you'll get in the book or the presentation if I come to do it for you. When we talk about defiance and insubordination, right? So defiance, definition, civil disobedience, right? Or just being disobedient, not following directives. Insubordination is not following the directions or the directives of an authoritative figure. That's the difference between defiance and insubordination. So then from there, what I walk people through, and I talk about a little bit of the book, okay, we need to define who is an authoritative figure in your school. So usually people say, oh, that's easy, Woods. Teachers, principals. Okay, so the cafeteria, the custodian is mopping the floor, kid kicks over the bucket. Oh, well, that's being insubordinate. Well, you just told them they're not an authoritative figure.
Sure.
So then it gets people really thinking like, okay, you need to make sure it's very clear on your end, because just using that behavior as example, that's still wrong. Kid kicking over, mopping is still wrong. But how we address the kid to show them what you did was wrong and how this is the behavior I need to see, we have to keep that same language. So if I'm saying you're being defiant, but then the administrator is saying you're being insubordinate, then someone else is saying, well, you're just being disrespectful. Well, think about all that confusion you're causing for the kid. Like, instead of all of us just saying, let's use the example of insubordinate, you were being insubordinate because the custodian asked you not to do that and pay attention, and you intentionally did that. You were being very insubordinate. Do you understand? And if we're all saying the same thing, it's going to hit very differently for the kid.
Yes.
So,
well, and then the back end too, you know, and I did this with my staff when I first got on the campus, which I don't know if they loved so much, was the discipline matrix, right? We have to assign the action to a consequence. And a lot of times, you know, we couldn't even define what was written on the matrix because the language was interpreted differently by each teacher, right? So with that interpretation comes an expectation of a consequence or punishment that equates with that level or tier of behavior. And if we can't even agree on the definition, then that's when, you know, expectations turn into disappointment, which then turns into animosity to potentially administrator. And that goes on not just with the teacher to admin, but that could be parent to admin also. So there's a lot of components there. And like I said, flashcards to help in just kind of that assessment, but also that teach piece of making sure everyone's on the same page. Students, teachers, parents, admin, everybody. So that way, like you said, when we're trying to reinforce, we're all on the same page. We're all using the same language. We're all teaching the same lesson to maintain and create the behavior that we anticipate in the future. So absolutely love it, man. Everyone needs to buy the book as soon as possible. Make sure that you have that resource for your school as you're trying to make sure everyone has that etiquette down. And then I want to talk about actionable items, right? We've talked a lot about, well, a variety of different topics here. And I don't know if you want to equate it to something that's been already discussed or if you want to bring something new to the table. But for those who are listening after this conversation, you know, what is something they can do tomorrow or next week to enhance their leadership journey?
The first thing, I think it's looking in the mirror and knowing what you stand for. What do you, and when I say what do you stand for, like, what are your calling cards? You know, it's hard to be a master of everything.
That's true.
And I will say, I've met some people out there where I'm like, man, they could do no wrong. Like they just like every single, you know, I've got a couple of mentors where I'm like, man, you like jump from this to this, and you're just spot on, right? And I honestly believe there are those LeBron James out the world in education, those unicorns who seem to be like, you can just max out the stats and everything. For most of us, common folks, I like to say, right? You have a trait that you're good at. And I know I'm using like a sports analogy, but I love to have people think about it through that lens. So like you could be like, what is your calling card? And for some people, it's like, I know instruction. Like I know literacy to a core. Like that's my thing. Right? For others, it could be discipline or behavior. Hey, I know how to effectively change and guide school climate, right? So when you know what you bring to the table, what is your thing, Then you think about, okay, how do I show people that skill set, right? And then as you have the opportunity to move into certain positions, how do you surround yourself with people who balance you out? Yep. You know, given another sports example, it's kind of like, I'll use like the NFL. So you always see like they're going to hire this quarterback coach or this offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. And I tell people all the time, if you watch it, what typically gets them fired, if they get fired, isn't what they struggled with. It's what they're known for. Like if you're known to be the offensive guru, you can't be last in the NFL in scoring. Like people are like, hey, why do I have you? Right? If you're known for defense, you can't be last in defense. Like, and I know I'm being very like blunt when I say those things, because there is some give and take, different situations, but it's the same way I think when you think of all leadership experiences. So I always tell people, first thing to do is look in the mirror. What am I known for? What are the things that I'm like, hey, this is my niche, right? Then from there, how do you not only perfect your niche and really become an expert in it, but then you have to think about what are the things that you need to make yourself rounded out. So for me, Josh, I'll tell you, the thing that I learned very quickly was most of my experience has been secondary and or the collegiate level.
Right.
So where is my gap? My gap was elementary.
Yep.
Right. So I tell folks all the time, when I got into some of my first leadership roles, especially at the middle school level, I sat down with several folks that I know very well. And I said, I need you to give me a boot camp on literacy, because I know from my experiences, I know how to guide children and people through reading to learn. But I've never been in the role of teaching people how to learn to read.
Right.
So for people listening, there in my good educators know there's a very big difference. There's a difference between learning to read and reading to learn. So I'll be honest, man, I went back to school essentially. I had folks kind of indoctrinate me on like, this is how, man, you these are the components. You better know phonics, right? Yeah. You better understand what tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 words are. You better know your Dolce and Fry words, right? You know, so the listeners out there, I'm sorry, I'm throwing a lot of stuff out there. Like, so your cycle, yes. You know, then as you get into your tier 2 words, well, those are like your action verbs. So explain, analyze, compare, contrast, et cetera, et cetera. Well, then you get to tier 3 words, content specific words. So the words that you would find in your given content. See, those are things that I kind of knew, but I really didn't know at the time. And I really had to go back to school essentially and start from scratch with folks to say like, hey, I want to be the best educator I can be. Like, I want to be an amazing middle school administrator. And I'm getting those kids from elementary. And some of them might have that deficit. So I need to know what I need to do to reinforce that with the teachers and so forth. So yeah, if you can keep those things in mind for the listeners out there, that will definitely help you, in my opinion, overnight as you start and you really grasp this leadership journey.
That's awesome. All right, Matt. So how can folks, connect with you either through your website or through social media? Because I know, we just touched a little bit about what you offer as far as the podcast and the book, but I also know you speak, you are a consultant, you have other resources. Like for those who are watching on YouTube, there's a poster right behind Matt that he offers. So, how can people connect with you on social media or through your website?
Definitely, man. The best way to reach me, my website, that's www.leadingoutthewoods.com. So same title as the podcast, Leading Out the Woods. You can find me on Twitter. Well, I'm sorry, now it's called X, but for some of us old school, formerly Twitter.
I'll keep calling it Twitter.
At Wood from a Woods. Those are just the two best ways to really find me. But, I am on LinkedIn at Matthew Woods. I'm available in a lot of different places. But if you go to my website, that's probably the best way to find me, because I have the podcast, my tags, everything is locked and loaded in there. And regardless if you try to reach out to me about the book or to speak, I just love engaging with different folks. And I love learning from other people and getting their experiences on things. So, hey, feel free to reach out to me. Glad to connect.
For sure. So I got it on the screen for those who are watching on YouTube, leadingoutofthewoods.com. And then, of course, if you head over to my website, joshsandberg.com, I'll have all the various links to social media. So that way you can connect via social media or just follow, subscribe to all of Matt's, various content out there. I know there's a lot of it. And then, of course, if you're watching on YouTube, thank you so much. And love for you to subscribe to the channel, either on the Teach Better channel or Joshua Stamper channel. And I appreciate you guys engaging in the comment section also. So with that, Matt, it is always a pleasure. I could probably talk to you for another 3 hours. So you had talked about being on the podcast again. We'll make sure that happens, because I have a lot of other topics just from this conversation that I want to expand on, and love to pick your brain further in the future.
Most definitely, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you.